Okay, let's dive in. Picture this scene. German tanks rolling through Vilnius, Lithuania's capital, but the locals, they're actually cheering them on. And you've got the Bundeswehr band playing Prussia's Glory, a tune with, well, a lot of history packed into it. You see these German officials, and apparently there was this flicker of sort of unease. Then they see the Lithuanian faces, genuinely happy, and they relax. It's quite an image.
It really is, especially when you think about Germany's post-war posture.
Yeah.
You know, the peace dividend, the caution.
Exactly. For decades, that's been the story. But now something huge, almost hard to believe, is happening with their defense policy. So that's what this deep dive is about. We're drawing on a really insightful recent piece from The Economist to understand this transformation. Our mission really is to get to grips with the Zeitenwende, that's the German word, turning point. What is it? What's driving it? What are these huge goals they've set? And crucially, what are the big challenges? And how is it changing Germany and its place in Europe?
And that scene you mentioned in Vilnius, that wasn't just symbolic. That armored brigade, aiming for nearly 5,000 troops by 2027. That's Germany's first permanent combat troop deployment abroad since World War II.
Wow, first permanent deployment.
Yeah, just let that sink in. The historical weight, the source is clear. This isn't tweaking things around the edges. It's a fundamental shift, and it's happening directly because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
So Ukraine was the trigger. And the first big move was from Olaf Scholz, the chancellor then. That massive $100 billion fund, right, about $114 billion.
That's the one. Big headlines. But, you know, the current head of the armed forces, General Breuer, he's quoted saying that initial money, it was mostly just filling in the potholes. Important, sure, but not the whole transformation.
Just patching things up, essentially.
Pretty much. And now, under Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the plan the article lays out is, well, it's about moving way beyond potholes. It's about ramping up spending for the long haul.
And they actually loosen the debt brake for this. That's a big deal in Germany, isn't it?
Oh, huge. Germany's debt brake is famously strict, loosening it specifically for defense. That signals how serious this is.
Okay, so ramping up. What kind of numbers are we talking about here? The article mentioned some figures that sounded, well, pretty staggering.
They are. The aim isn't just the standard NATO 2% GDP target. They're looking at potentially 3.5% just for defense, plus another 1.5% for related infrastructure.
So that's 5% total.
Potentially, yes. The article calculates this could mean something like 215 billion a year.
215 billion euros a year. Wow.
It's an enormous sum.
Yeah.
And it's tied directly to a stated ambition from Chancellor Merz, making the Bundeswehr the strongest conventional army in Europe.
Strongest in Europe.
And positioning Germany as NATO's critical backbone. I mean, you just haven't heard language like that from German leadership in generations.
So how are the neighbors, the allies, taking all this sudden shift in money and rhetoric?
Well, the article puts it pretty bluntly. Almost all of Germany's allies are delighted. You get the sense there's been a collective sigh of relief, maybe. After years of, let's say, Germany being seen as maybe not pulling its full weight on defense.
Okay, so the money's potentially there, the ambition's declared, but where's it actually going? What does the military need right now?
Good question. The article points to some key areas, clearly influenced by, lessons from Ukraine. A big one is air defense. Massive ramp-up needed there. Against drones, missiles, the works.
Makes sense.
Then there's ammunition. Stocks are critically low, apparently. They need refilling urgently. And they're also looking at building long-range precision strike capabilities. Stuff that allows them to hit targets far away, accurately.
So pretty fundamental stuff for modern warfare and being a serious NATO player.
Exactly. And the military leadership. They're really pushing for speed. General Alphonse Mays, he's head of the army. He wants mass production from the defense industry. Now,
Get the factories rolling.
Right. But what's interesting is his pragmatism. He's saying, look, if German industry can't deliver fast enough, let's look at off-the-shelf solutions from elsewhere, such as America. He wants a broader approach, basically saying we can't afford delays.
Time seems critical, and it's not just about kit, is it? It's people, too. General Breuer mentioned needing more troops.
Yeah, a lot more. His estimate, according to the article, is an extra 100,000 troops that includes reservists needed by 2029 just to meet NATO commitments.
An extra 100,000 when they're already struggling to hit their current target.
Exactly. The current goal is 203,000 personnel, and they're finding even that difficult. So adding another 100,000, it's a huge personnel challenge.
Which I suppose leads us straight into the challenges facing this whole Zeitenwende. Money helps, but the article makes it clear the problems run deep, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about writing checks. One big challenge is simply adapting the military itself to modern warfare.
Like you mentioned, learning from Ukraine, drones, battlefield transparency.
Precisely. There's this real worry, mentioned in the piece, that Germany might end up preparing for the last war. Stockpiling drones that become obsolete quickly or sticking too rigidly to old legacy systems.
Finding that balance. Nico Lange, a former defense official, had that quote, didn't he? Something like,
Yeah. Tech in Germany is amazing, but the political side does not know how to use it. It captures that gap between potential and practical application.
so how do you foster innovation? How do you build a military that can actually adapt on the fly?
Well, one perspective in the article from Gunbert Scherf of a defense tech startup argues for a different model entirely. Less top-down control, more market-driven.
Market-driven defense.
Yeah, an industry that innovates, fails in one place, and succeeds elsewhere, using private capital. More dynamic, less rigid central planning.
Okay, so adapting the military mindset, integrating tech, that's one hurdle. What else? The article seemed to really hammer on bureaucracy.
Oh, definitely. That's maybe the most consistent criticism. Sluggish planning, nightmare procurement processes. Even the Federal Audit Office apparently slammed the Bundeswehr for being top-heavy with managers and needing far-reaching changes.
General Mass sounded pretty frustrated, too.
Yeah, his quote was something like, procurement takes too long. Signing a contract is one thing, getting the stuff to the troops is another. It's that whole pipeline, right? From decision to delivery. It just gets clogged.
And the article mentioned gold plating. What's that about?
Ah, yes. It's basically imposing incredibly specific, sometimes excessive requirements on equipment. The example that just leaps out is specifying that tanks must be suitable for pregnant women.
Slight pause. Tanks.
Yeah.
Suitable for pregnant women.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That certainly illustrates the level of detail, maybe slowing things down.
You could say that. Matthias Wachter from the Federation of German Industries put it well. The 80% solution now is better than the 100% one in 5 years.
Get something good enough out there quickly. Exactly. He pointed out the German Iris-T air defense system is proving itself incredibly effective in Ukraine right now. But for the Bundeswehr itself, it still apparently faces hurdles with domestic testing requirements.
Despite being battle-proven elsewhere. So who's trying to fix this? The article mentioned the defense minister, Boris Pistorius.
Yes, Pistorius. He's kind of the figurehead trying to tackle these roadblocks. And the article notes he's actually become quite popular. Apparently, his plain-speaking, straightforward style resonates.
Cuts through the usual political talk.
Seems so, but there are questions. A Green MP, Sarah Nanni, praised him as the best minister for years, but added a caveat. But he can be a bit superficial. Like, does he have the patience for the really deep, grinding bureaucratic reform needed?
Yeah, that kind of detailed work isn't always glamorous.
And they even passed a new law, the, let me try this, Planungs- und Beschaffungsbeschleunigungsgesetz, the Planning and Procurement Acceleration Act. Right. But the article suggests maybe just tweaking the existing system with a new law. It might not be enough. Fundamental change might be what's required.
Okay, so we've got the tech challenges, the bureaucratic nightmares, but the article also digs into something deeper, maybe more sensitive for Germany, which is the society ready for all this?
Yeah, yes. That question of being kriegstüchtig, war ready, as Minister Pistorius puts it. Is the German public ready for that?
It really cuts to the heart of decades of German identity, doesn't it? The article contrasted Chancellor Scholz's initial caution, worried about social splits, skeptical about military force, with the sort of sharper tone from Merz now.
You definitely see remnants of the older attitudes, like those self-imposed bans at dozens of universities on taking government money for military research. There's still a very strong pacifist undercurrent.
Deeply ingrained.
And there's a risk here. Claudia Major, quoted in the piece, worries that if Ukraine ends in some kind of dirty ceasefire, fighting stops but territory stays occupied, it could kill the momentum for the Zeitenwende. Well, it might boost calls for just going back to diplomacy, détente with Russia, undermine the whole argument for this massive military buildup. The urgency could fade.
That makes sense. But the article also suggests attitudes are changing, right?
Yes, definitely. Partly, it seems, because loosening the debt brake meant they could boost defense spending without immediately slashing social programs. So it avoided that direct guns or butter political fight, at least initially. Voter support seems to have held up, according to a chart they included.
And soldiers are noticing it on the ground.
Yeah, that quote from the cadet officer was striking. People stopping him on the street to say, "Thank you for your service," like in America. Apparently that kind of public recognition is pretty new in Germany.
That's a significant cultural shift.
And perhaps the biggest test of this societal shift is coming. The debate over conscription.
Ah, right. It was suspended back in 2011, wasn't it? But they need those 100,000 extra troops we talked about.
Exactly. Feels almost impossible to reach that target without some form of compulsory service. For now, they're starting with compulsory questionnaires just for 18-year-old men.
Yeah.
Extending it to women would need a constitutional change, apparently.
So, questionnaires first. Buying time.
Seems like it. Buys time to rebuild barracks, trainers, get ready. But the article's take is pretty clear. Hardly anyone thinks an element of compulsion can be avoided.
And General Mays, the Army chief.
He's quoted saying, "I'm absolutely convinced we will have this debate." He sees it as inevitable.
And what about public opinion on bringing back the draft?
Interestingly, the polls cited suggest a majority of Germans actually favor restoring conscription, though, maybe unsurprisingly, support is lowest among the young people who'd actually be called up.
So this whole societal wrestling match, the article used an example, didn't it? A town hall meeting.
Yeah, the Zeitenwende on Tour event in Görlitz, out in eastern Germany. The source described it as kind of embodying Germany's agonies over this whole shift.
Agonies, what happened there?
Well, the audience was described as disputatious. You had some people blaming NATO expansion for the war, criticizing arms companies, but then others were pushing back hard against those views. It wasn't exactly a consensus meeting.
Sounds like the debate is happening, but it's fractious.
Very much so. There was an anecdote about Andre, a hospital worker from Dresden, who came specifically to support rearmament. He said the issue splits his own colleagues right down the middle, 50-50. It's not a fringe debate. It's dividing workplaces.
Wow. So it's really hitting home.
Nico Lange, who we mentioned earlier, he called engaging the public on this grinding work. Especially, he noted, asking Germans to potentially sacrifice to send their kids into service for foreign countries. That's a tough sell after decades of a distant policy.
Going against the grain of recent history.
But as the article sort of concludes, that core message from leaders like Merst, Lithuania's security is also our security. That plain statement of NATO solidarity. It implies real demands on ordinary Germans. And the feeling is that message is maybe slowly beginning to get through.
So quite a journey we've covered in this deep dive, from that really striking image in Vilnius, through the sheer scale of the money and ambition, and then digging into all these layers of challenges, technical, bureaucratic, but also deeply societal and cultural.
It really is a fascinating mix, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got this high-level strategic decision, this massive financial lever being pulled, but then it runs straight into the messy reality of changing institutions, changing mindsets, overcoming decades of history. It makes the Zeitenwende incredibly complex.
It really does. And it kind of leaves you, the listener, with a big question to chew on, doesn't it? What does it actually mean, not just militarily, but culturally, politically, psychologically, for Germany to consciously try and become war-ready again after all those years focused explicitly on peace? And what could the success or maybe the struggles of this whole transformation mean for the rest of Europe's security down the line? Definitely something to think about.